For those who don't know me, I'm Joshua Cohen. I'm the Community Director at Partners for Climate Action Hudson Valley, where we support ecological leadership across the Hudson Valley by deploying capital in its many forms to support local equitable solutions. So thanks again for joining us this morning for this morning coffee session entitled Bringing Climate into the Classroom. These sessions are part of a series intended as learning opportunities and inspiration for our local climate community. This session today is designed for teachers to help support climate curriculum efforts in their classrooms, schools, or programs. But even if you're not a teacher, and I know many of you are not, I am not myself, I think you'll find the content rich and will hopefully be encouraged to support the teachers in your life and in this work, or simply find ways of weaving climate conversations more into your own lives. So before I introduce our two speakers, I want to run through our program really quickly for the next hour together. Each speaker is going to give a brief presentation, after which I will ask them to answer a few questions that I've prepared as part of a moderated Q&A. I'll then open up the Q&A for all of you. If you have questions throughout the session, feel free to drop them directly into the chat, and we'll get to them during the Q&A section. You might also, when it's time for Q&A, might want to raise your virtual hand. If you feel like saying your question out loud, you're welcome to do that then. And we'll try to wrap up around 9:30. So the speakers have also both agreed to share their presentations with everybody afterward. So any resources that are mentioned, as well as those presentations and a recording of this session will be emailed out to everyone who has RSVP'd for the session. So I also wanted to just ask that everyone who's not speaking, just try to keep themselves on mute, just to cut down on background sound. So thank you. So I'm going to introduce our first speaker, Samrat Pathania, who many of you might know, is a Master Teacher Emeritus in Physics, Mathematics, and Computer Science. He's co-founder of the Educator Collective for Environmental Justice. He's also a teacher at the Wallkill Central School District and a member of the Mid-Hudson Climate Reality Project. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Samrat.
Thanks, Joshua. This looks like a lovely audience. I know a few people, and it looks like a very knowledgeable audience too. Susan's here, Jeff's here. I would have loved to see Jeff in the kitchen. I always see him outside the kitchen, so that's that would have been good. But anyhow, all right. So let's get to point straight away. I apologize in advance if anything that I say seems like too elementary. I'm trying to make a point, and there's some things that I need to cover in order to do that. I'll stick to the time. I'll try to stick to the time limit that Joshua's given me. All right. So here we are. I'm gonna hide this just a second. Perfect. And if you don't mind, I'm just going to turn off my screen for the duration of this so that I don't have to look at myself. It's like being in a classroom and seeing myself. That's hard to do. Okay. So this is a graph that always brings clarity to any wishful thinking that I might start engaging in as I think about climate change. In order to meet our climate goals, the 1.5 degrees Celsius target, starting in 2021, we needed to reduce emissions at a breakneck 10% a year. Now, if we had started in 2000, it would have been only 4% a year. But we're not in 2000, and we're not in 2001. We are behind. The more we wait, the worse it gets. So the question is, where do we start? Well, luckily, we're at a point in history, even if we are behind schedule, that climate change is no longer a technological problem. Most climate solutions exist and are economically feasible. However, it seems that we do have a big cultural problem, as I know many of you understand. Let me explain how I see this problem. So in 2019, the CLCPA was passed in New York and requires New York to reduce economy-wide greenhouse gas emissions by 40% by 2030 and no less than 85% by 2050 from 1990 levels. The Inflation Reduction Act, which became law of the land in 2022 under the Biden administration, represents the largest investment into addressing climate change in the US history. According to several independent analyses, this law is projected to reduce 2030 US greenhouse gas emissions to 40% below 2005 levels. But the US is not China. China is the global leader in renewable energy because its authorities don't have to wait for the consent of the masses. Despite the remarkable and far-seeing climate legislation in the US, we still have to implement it on the ground. We simply can't force it down people's throats. For example, the government has already given incentives to people to buy heat pumps, electric water heaters, electric vehicles, home storage. But again, they can't force people to buy this stuff. So how do we bring about this cultural transformation that is much needed? Now, there are many ways to do this, but being a public school educator, my battleground, and I mean it in a nice way, is my school community. By the way, this is a photo of a project that I'm doing with my science club students to revamp our defunct school courtyard into an outdoor learning center with seating for a whole class, pollinator gardens, etc. Hope and trust are the two pillars of a classroom community. A teacher must trust in the abilities and skills of her students and always be hopeful that they are capable of growth, no matter what the circumstances of their lives. On the other hand, a student too must trust that the teacher is sincere and knowledgeable. The student must have hope that the future holds something worthwhile for them. When these ingredients are present, learning can be magical. This photo is of students from my college physics class playing a cooperative card game called the Greenhouse Game and learning about climate solutions in a non-traditional manner. However, hope and trust can be short-lived if adults cannot follow it with real action. Young people are really good at seeing bullshit and are no longer afraid to call out the adults for being hypocrites. The students know the reality of their lives. They see their world being run on fossil fuels. And the children also know that the adults are resistant to change. They are reluctant to change their diets despite claiming that the children are picky eaters. The adults are afraid of switching their gas vehicles to electric cars. They're afraid of moving their pension money out of fossil fuel investments. And they refuse to admit that they can be wrong. If we cannot lead with our actions, our students will not trust us. If our students cannot trust us, they will lose hope. And there is no authentic learning without hope and trust. So the key question for me is, how do we help teachers create authentic learning experience in their classrooms around climate solutions? An answer that I often hear from people is that we need mandated climate curriculum. In 2020, New Jersey became the first state in the nation to incorporate climate change education across its K-12 learning standards. This top-down approach is necessary, but clearly not sufficient. I've heard from teachers who are members of the Climate Reality Project that teachers in New Jersey are struggling to execute this mandate because they feel underprepared. To create authentic learning experiences for their students, the teachers themselves must transform. This quote is from one of my heroes and the founding father of my motherland, India. And it is often paraphrased as, "Be the change you seek in the world." Now, climate solutions by definition cannot be disconnected from the reality of the world we live in. Therefore, teachers will have to explore solutions, experience them, live them, before they can become authentic facilitators of that exploration in their classrooms. I believe that it is exactly because of this lived experience, my personal lived experience, that the 1 month net zero home project that I do with my college physics students to retrofit their fossil fuel-based homes. It's a very high impact project precisely because of the fact that this is lived experience for me. So in light of all that I've said, what must professional development for teachers look like? Community building should be at the core of teacher professional development. The community should not just be confined to other teachers in the school or other families in the school district. Teachers must connect with teachers and people from surrounding school districts. By the way, these are photos of teachers and guidance counselors from our school district learning about climate solutions by playing the same card game that my students play. Professional development for teachers must be led by teachers because only they know what their true needs are. They may not be climate experts, but only they have intimate knowledge of their classroom communities. Gaps in teacher knowledge about solutions must be filled in by experts in the larger community, which may be other teachers, parents, activists, or professionals. And exactly like the kind of audience we have in this room. So just wanted to touch upon a couple of projects that I've been working on besides what I do in my classrooms and school district to kind of show exactly that my idea of what this learning community would look like. So the New York Master Teacher Program is a professional network, more than 1,400 STEM teachers throughout the state. It's a 4-year program. I've already been through it. So few years ago, I and a few teachers from Long Island collaborated virtually on Zoom during COVID to create what is called the Enviro STEM PLT, Professional Learning Team, meeting monthly, looking at curriculum, designing activities for our classes, bringing in experts when we need them. So that's an ongoing project. The Mid-Hudson Teacher Center, which is based at SUNY New Paltz, it supports over 10,000 educators across multiple counties around us. We've had a climate solution sustainability cohort running there. This is also a monthly project meeting, and same idea. Get teachers together, have them work on curriculum, bring in experts, fill in the gaps as we need it, and I've convinced them to create a position which will be called the Program Manager for Science and Sustainability. Most likely I'll lead that starting September, but the nature of the work is not going to change. We need to provide more professional development, and the hope is that both with the Master Teacher Program and the Mid-Hudson Teacher Center, we can continue doing that. Just a quick example of the kind of workshops that we've offered through these programs, both of these programs, which I've connected, weaving climate solutions throughout the chemistry curriculum. That was Megan Ferguson. She's the department chair at SUNY New Paltz. Biodiversity in the backyard, speak with your trees. This was a session at Duzine Elementary School, led by Laura, who's my partner. She also teaches at SUNY New Paltz. The ecosystems of Nyquist Wildlife Sanctuary. This was Cara Gentry. She is from the Wallkill Valley Land Trust. Again, bringing in teachers so that they can experience all that's going on around them, and then they can decide how they want to bring this into their classrooms. Very quickly, I also want to mention that I co-founded the Educator Collective for Environmental Justice with my friend from California, who's an incredible educator. She's at UC Berkeley right now and working on a graduate program. And it's the same idea. We're incorporating education, professional development opportunities for teachers. We're bringing in youth, and these are mostly college students from UC Berkeley and surrounding colleges for action research and community-based research, so that communities that are being hard hit by issues of environmental justice, or rather injustice, they can have a voice in how do we go about solving those problems. And again, one last thing, this is the kind of project that comes out of this idea that I was talking about earlier about teachers collaborating with experts in the community. This is a project that we've just launched last month, the Electric Bus Transition Project. It's being led by Joe Londa, who's a New Paltz resident, retired engineer. And we brought together students from 4 different school districts who are going to look at their school's transportation system, analyze needs, and see what would it take to transition it to an electrified transportation system. So the students will do the research. Joe is leading this. He'll support them. I'm backroom staff. I'm helping him with some of the things because I'm in the classroom. So I think, again, we need more of these collaborations between experts in the community and teachers in the classroom. Just want to end with this quote, which always, again, gives me a lot of clarity. What we do now and in the next few years will profoundly affect the next few thousand years. I'm an optimist at heart. Anyone who is not does not belong in the classroom. I know we can turn things around on climate, and I'm positive that if we do, teachers will have to lead from the front. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Samrat. Really appreciate that. Thank you for sharing your insights with us and for the work that you do preparing teachers. If folks have questions for Samrat, feel free to put them in the chat. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll have some time during the Q&A to ask Samrat directly any things you might be wondering. So we're now going to shift. We're going to go from STEM to STEAM. We're going to add the arts into this conversation. So we are joined here also by Mary Jane Nusbaum, who many of you may know. Mary Jane is a visual artist and has been a teacher in the Hudson Valley for over 20 years. She's taught at Wild Earth and the New Paltz Middle School, and is co-advisor for a climate club at the New Paltz Middle School as well. So I'm going to hand it over to you, MJ. Thanks for being here with us today.
Great. Thank you, Josh. And thank you, Samrat, for all of that wonderful information. And thanks all of you for being here. I'm just going to share my screen. And Samrat, I like that you muted your face.
Imagine teaching in a classroom with a mirror in front of you.
Talking. It is very distracting. So you can see my screen, right? I can mute my face to follow your lead. Thank you. Okay. So, yeah, thank you all for being here. I think this is a really important conversation we're having, and it's really just the beginning. So there are so many different ways that we can all plug in. So my name is Mary Jane Nusbaum, and this is a hummingbird moth. And this is Henry. So I will never forget the day 11-year-old Henry saw his first hummingbird moth. We were researching pollinators who live around here when Henry came across a video of this creature hovering in front of a fluted flower with its proboscis out, its fuzzy body, its vibrating wings, and the look of wonder on Henry's face was priceless. And he just kept saying, "That is so cool," over and over again. And this level of excitement and inspiration is one of the reasons I love teaching art. And I've been teaching art in public schools and community programs for the past 20 years or so. And I'm passionate about making art, gardening, teaching art, and preserving our natural world. And I gather that because you're here this morning, you're passionate about something and you want to do something about climate. And maybe you've already started something, but maybe you're not sure where to begin. And I'd like to suggest that you start where you are. Start with what you're passionate about and go from there. My passions for nature connection and art first crystallized with Wild Earth, a local wilderness school. I loved the impact all the nature connection and immersion and gratitude, the culture of gratitude they have there had on my two kids. And eventually I became an instructor and made a lot of earth art with kids out in the forest. I also worked with Women's Studio Workshop in Rosendale, and saw the joy on the faces of mothers and grandmothers working with their grandkids to transform irises into paper at a Mother's Day class. From there, I did a lot of workshops with friends and partnered to do a foraging and natural jewelry workshop at the O Positive Festival one year and a natural dye workshop at Arrowwood Brewery. We collaborated with community groups in Kingston to offer a series of workshops using invasive species and other natural materials to create bags and baskets based on ancestral skills and crafts. And each time I connected with other people around nature and art, I saw it was so touching. I saw the looks of wonder and curiosity and excitement as they learned to do new things with their hands using natural materials. And strangers struck up conversations, helped each other, worked together, had fun together. And all of these positive experiences inspired me to bring nature-connected art lessons into my classroom. So during remote learning, I wanted to get kids away from screens, so I instructed them to make nature journals at home with materials they had on hand and go outside to sit and look around. I told them to tune into their senses, take a deep breath, and see what was there. And then they were to write or draw in their journals and come back in and share about their experiences. Some kids saw birds outside, so we researched birds that interested them and drew pictures to get to know them better. This past year, during Bat Week, 6th graders learned about the benefits bats offer and that they are in danger from a variety of sources. They designed posters to share information, and many students began to see bats differently, have compassion for them, and some even said that they loved them. In my high school classes, we learned about fast fashion and how textile waste is clogging landfills around the globe. Then we upcycled old sweaters and made them into birds to draw connections between the human and more than human world. A couple of years ago, a group of kids approached me to be their advisor for a climate club they wanted to start at the middle school. They had been inspired by an environmental research project they did in 5th grade, but never got to present because of the pandemic. I had never led a climate before, so I reached out to a couple of science teachers and parents I knew with an interest in climate action so we could do it together. Step one, because some of the kids came in wanting to make signs and protest. And when we asked, well, what would you want to put on the signs? What do you want to protest? They really didn't know. So step one was to educate ourselves about climate issues so we could take action. So the kids decided to create video slideshows about climate topics of their choice and to share their findings on the morning announcements. Next, we got involved with the Stop Dan Scammer movement to prevent a fracked gas company from operating in a flood zone along the Hudson River. So it just seemed important that kids take action in some way, and they were motivated and they were driving the actions we were taking. And also to educate ourselves, we had some guest speakers come to talk to us about reducing plastics, recycling, composting, how to do laundry more sustainably. We learned about bees and other important issues. And many of the students were most passionate about animals, insects, and habitat loss. So we chose to focus on a pollinator garden to restore habitat in the town of New Paltz. Kids learned about native plants, painted signs and murals. A community member wrote a grant. Then we had a work day with the delivery of a massive load of donated topsoil, a bobcat, clipboards, lots of shovels, and we planted. And here's the garden, still growing strong today. So from this first small-ish project, though it was pretty big for us, we got some momentum. And through that process of building the garden in front of the community center, we met an expert gardener who helped us win a grant from Partners for Climate Action. Thank you, Partners for Climate Action. And it was an ecological restoration grant. And we started preparing, so we're making some pollinator gardens, a few pollinator gardens at Paltz Middle School. And we started preparing the soil this spring, and we'll finish planting in the fall. And we're going to be offering work days and create some videos so people can learn how to create pollinator meadows and foundation gardens in their own backyards. And as we prepped for the project, we had to make sure that the school principal and other stakeholders were supportive. It was important to have their buy-in because they will be helping the garden thrive in the future. So the buildings and grounds people were really important to have on board for this, and the Board of Ed. And this, this is Anne. This is what buy-in looks like. She's the principal of our school who stopped by to help on our workday, unannounced, on her motorcycle. So in a nutshell, that's where Start Where You Are has looked like for me. And I worked with things I was naturally drawn to with other interested people, some people who are interested in some of the same things. So maybe not all of you are into art and gardening. So I wanted to share with you these 17 Sustainable Development Goals from the United Nations. They're saying 2030 is the end goal, but I think it's a work in progress. But these goals aim to address many of the biggest issues we face across themes of ecological and social justice. And these goals help me connect the dots to a bigger picture of an interconnected, better world that could be possible. So maybe they can be helpful to you too. So here are a few takeaways, things that worked for me to keep things simple, because working with climate issues can be overwhelming. Start where you are. Connect your passions to climate action. What is your subject? What are you feeling passionate about in your subject or across the curriculum? Small is okay. We can't do everything, but all of us working together, we can. So we just have to do our part and find what that is. So finding partners, I've also found is really important because you keep each other going. So make sure they're close by, that you can work together and they're in your school or in your community. And ask your students what they care about Empower your students to take action. Get them outside. And nature videos and movies are great ways to connect with the wonder of the natural world. I think back to Henry's face when he first saw the video of that hummingbird moth. And for me, that's what it's all about. Henry's amazement and all the kids I've been able to reach, finding things to ignite their curiosity and passions just by starting where you are. And that's it for now. But please, let's keep these conversations going. Awareness and education and connection all matter if we're going to make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mary Jane. Thank you for the beauty that you bring into the world and the inspiration that you give to others. I remember when we first met at the Good Work Institute that you had a bowl that you had made out of mud from a riverbank with you. I remember being so in awe of that. Continued inspiration.
Thank you. Yeah, getting in the mud. Lotuses come out of the mud.
So we're gonna move into our moderated Q&A now. And Samrat, I couldn't help but notice when I was stalking you online that on your mathematics webpage you had a quote by George Cantor: "In mathematics, the art of asking questions is more valuable than solving problems." So we're gonna now launch into our questions here. And I'll start with a very basic one. And you've talked a bit about this, both of you so far, but what motivates you in this work? Why do you do this work? Either of you can start if you'd like.
MJ, can I go first? Is that okay? Okay. I think, Joshua, for me, coming from India and had the fact that all of my family lives in India, and to see how climate change is really affecting parts of the world that have had the least to do with the problem. The whole issue of the injustice around this is what really drives me. I find that I find that we are very lucky, like here in the Hudson Valley, especially where I live in New Paltz. I mean, even if you look at this last storm that we just had, like it's like nothing happened. Yesterday was a beautiful day, one of the most beautiful days we've had all summer. I'm walking around enjoying this, knowing that, and on the phone with my mother, they are getting flooded there in India, right? So she's showing me like we're on a live feed and she's showing me around her house as things are flooding, right? So this has been, I think that's my main driver, the fact that there are all these people in countries like India who've had so little to do with the problem, but will bear the brunt of this crisis. That's what motivates me the most.
Thank you. What about you, Mary Jane?
Well, the thing I'm really tuning into is getting kids to know about nature. So many kids are in front of screens a lot and they're not getting outside. And so getting them outside to be in nature and learn to love it, know about it, experience it, smell it, get their hands in the dirt, make things from the riverbank using the clay that they find, so that they can tune into the world around us. Somebody said that if you don't know it, if you don't care about it, you won't protect it. So in order to care and to see, I mean, we have emerald ash borers, the trees are falling left and right. There are all kinds of diseases trees are experiencing, and population declines in the animal kingdom and insect kingdom. So it's important for kids to know about these things and care so that they will protect them. Not just kids, all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. So for a teacher who might not already know a lot about climate change, climate science, climate policy, but they want to bring climate into their classroom, into their curriculum, where do they even start? Do you have advice for folks to sort of how to begin this process of bringing climate into their own classrooms?
I could say a small thing. Samrat and I were at a talk about sustainability and climate action in the classroom at SUNY New Paltz, and one of Samrat's colleagues, a math teacher, came and he described some of the ways he was bringing climate action into math. And so they were doing word problems. So he put in questions about electric cars. You know, if you are driving this far, how many whatever do you need to get in order to get to that place? So working climate issues into the curriculum. And one of the sixth grade teachers in my building came up to me this spring, and he said, "Oh my God, we were doing practice tests and there were questions about bats, and all the kids knew these questions. They knew the answers to what's happening with bats." And so, and also back to the math teacher, he put on a live stream of, I think it was the San Diego Zoo. Just every morning as the kids came in, they would see what was happening with the different animals at the zoo, just as a way of bringing connections into math class. So wherever you are, you can bring it into the curriculum. If you're writing, if you're studying, you know, whatever your subject is, there are ways to just bring it to that topic. Thank you.
If I may add to that, Joshua, I think post-COVID, things have changed drastically, where we've suddenly found access to resources that we didn't have before. So if a teacher really is in the place they don't know where to start, I think people can connect with online communities, right? Like if you look at the Mid-Hudson Teacher Center work or the Master Teacher Program, we are virtual teams essentially, right? So with the Master Teacher Program, you're talking across the state. Any teacher can join us. Most teachers need professional development credit. Like they need continuing education credits, and these programs we're designing these programs. I'm sure there are other people who are also doing the same thing. So I think the first thing I would recommend to a teacher is try to find a learning community in and around you who's doing this work, because I bet there's one, right? And then of course, like there are lots of online resources, one can always go there. And that's why, like to what Mary Jane was saying, is that once you do that, then you know, oh, I can start here. This is a small place I can start, as opposed to saying, oh, this is such a big problem, where do I even begin? I think you follow in the footsteps of others who've done some work. That work becomes a little easier.
Great, thank you both. So I know teaching is not easy. I'm curious what has been the most challenging part of integrating climate into your curriculum for each of you. Mary Jane, would you like to start with that?
Sure. I think the most difficult thing is the structure of the day in a typical public school, where you have 42 minutes, the kids come in, they go out, and each subject is being taught in its own silo. So interconnectivity is challenging. I've worked with other teachers, so you know, to try to time that we're covering some of the same topics at the same time. So, you know, when we were learning about bats, in science, they were talking about some issues with bats. In science, they were doing observational drawings and tree identification and leaf studies. So I asked if I could take on some of the drawing stuff and they could cover the other parts of it. So, that part is, I feel, the most challenging, because if I try to tackle everything in my 42 minutes of art, kids are like, this is art, we want to make art, and why are we doing science and taking so much time doing this thing when we only have 42 minutes to make art every other day? So yeah, so somehow figuring out collaborations where the learning can happen and it can be holistic and reach kids in all these different ways across the subjects, making more connections.
Thank you. What about you, Samrat?
That's I think it's very similar to what MJ is saying. I think that's the key point, because when we try to discuss climate or bring climate solutions into a classroom, by their very nature, they tend to be interdisciplinary, right? You can't really stick to one thing. I can't say, I'm going to give you a physics problem. It can be a physics problem, but as I explore that problem, it naturally weaves into, the mathematical portion can be heavy, but physics, we do that. You could be talking about biological systems. So initially, students tend to have this thing is like MJ said, why this in a physics classroom? So I think that's the key piece. And I think with me, they accept it because they understand that I'm crazy. So there's no expected that's going to happen in the classroom. But I think teachers can prepare students for that by really like setting this expectation from the beginning of the year that there's no way you can say that this is all that this content, this subject is about, right? There's no way you can separate, say, physics from mathematics, from chemistry, from biology. Where is the boundary line? So maybe that's a problem I've had, and I think that's what I would recommend to teachers is to start having those conversations with students, asking them questions as to where are those interdisciplinary boundaries. And as students start asking those questions, they will not find those boundaries. And then our work becomes a little easier.
Great. You had mentioned, Samrat, the teachers in New Jersey who are woefully unprepared to talk about climate and to teach about climate when mandated to do so. So for teachers maybe in New York who really want to bring climate education into their classrooms, but might be experiencing some resistance from leadership within their schools or their school districts, do you have advice for those types of teachers?
I'd be curious, Joshua, what would resistance mean in this respect? I think I think where I teach in a what is traditionally would be called a conservative school district. I've never faced any resistance, right? I think it's about framing the issue, right? Yes, some say the work of my nonprofit is around environmental justice. Now that can be a hot button. Justice can be a hot button topic politically. I choose different words to describe the safe problem, and my students are willing to come along and explore those issues. So I think it might be just a question of framing the problem in such a way that members of the community or members of the administration see that they have a stake in this. I think sometimes we can tend to be too focused on how we see the problem or what we see is necessary in terms of action, as opposed to asking the stakeholders in the community, here's the problem, how do you want to come at it, right? So my advice would be thinking about reframing the conversation, because it can be done. And I mean, like I said, I don't feel any pushback on all the climate solutions work that I do in the community.
Great, good. Have you
Sure.
experienced any resistance or seen that play out in your school?
Some. I think, a lot of it seems to be overwhelm. People have so many things they have to do on a regular day that to introduce another topic that feels like a lot, and where do you start? Like that more than resistance to the topic, like the custodians have so much going on, and then we start poking around and how much are we actually recycling, and that it. So I think choosing where to start, choosing where you're not finding that resistance, and like Samrat said, framing it in a way that is not polarizing, that working with the kids around things that we understand and know to be important, given where we are in the evolution of the human species, is important to address in some way. And, getting the kids involved to learn about these things, do projects, create art, and opportunities for them to engage in project-based learning, place-based learning that connects to these issues, that are just facts, learning about trees and learning about the infestations. Nobody can argue with that. And getting the kids involved, and the kids speaking up, and the kids bringing that information home and seeing their faces and seeing them care. Those are all antidotes, I think, to resistance to these topics.
Great, thank you. We had a session, a morning coffee session in May with Harriet Sugarman of Climate Mama, and we talked about how to talk to young people about climate change. A lot of young people are experiencing this grief and overwhelm, as you mentioned. And you are both parents as well as teachers. So I'm wondering if you have any advice for parents out there in terms of how to talk to their children, or how parents can support teachers in talking about climate change and integrating climate education into their classrooms.
Benji, do you mind if I go first?
Yeah, please.
No, go ahead.
So I think, Joshua, the key thing is when we talk about climate change, from my perspective, and I think Harriet probably stresses on this as well, is stay solution centered. Like I think we all know, and I think given from the few people I know in this room, we all understand that we have the solutions. Our problem is not a technological one, right? So what I found is, especially in the older educators, people who are like, I'm 10 years into teaching. This is my second career. I found that people who are like in their or getting close to retirement, they're still using old vocabulary. They'll say things like alternative energy. That's so 70s, right? I'm sorry, like it is, right? We're no longer there. We've moved on, right? And they are not, what they don't see is the rate at which change is happening and the rate at which it can happen. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that we are meeting our goals, but the fact is that we can. So I think, as I tend to think of in my classes, especially because I feel like most of my students don't understand the scale of the problem, I tend to hit them with a few gut punches early in the year. Like I show few hard things very early so that I get their attention, and they're like, what do we do about this? And then it's all solutions work. Then it's connecting solutions to what we're doing in, say, in a physics or a mathematics class. It's connecting solutions to what they can do in their lives. How can they have conversations with their parents about things that they may be using in the house? How can they talk to their teachers about things that we might be using in the school? So I think as long as we say solution centered, it's not a problem. I think they feel hopeful, but it has, like I was stressing in my presentation, we have to lead from the front. Teachers, students see bullshit very clearly. Like they see that we don't really mean what we are saying. And that's the most difficult thing for young people.
Thank you for that. What about you, Mary Jane?
Oh, yeah, the bullshit meter is high. They can see it. And so finding ways in, showing images of the problems in the world that can get their attention, because they know it's sort of this vague thing that's out there. It feels really big. It's oppressive. What do we do about it? Oh, it's too big. I don't know. It's general and feels terrible, but what can you do? So I think getting into some specific things that where kids can take action on a local level is one way to address that anxiety, because then they feel like they have some agency, and maybe there's something political they can do. When the kids were working on Dance Scammer, they wanted to table. They set up and went outside a store and talked to people about Dance Scammer and environmental racism and where this program was being proposed and in a flood zone. And there were all kinds of things that they learned about and that they were able to share about and share with their friends. So action, concrete action based on something real and manageable.
Great.
Feels important.
Thank you. We're certainly about action here at Partners for Climate Action, so I appreciate that. And the solutions forward piece is so important too.
Joshua, can I quickly talk about that question that from Alex in the chat?
With resources?
With the resources, yeah.
Yes, please,
right,
please.
right. Like, are there that I wish were lacking, right? And Alex, I've always leaned on the side that climate solutions and how things are moving in terms of implementation across the world and across different sectors that we want to decarbonize is a very fast moving target. And I personally don't feel like resources are lacking. I've always felt very strongly that this is something teachers have to this has to be teacher led, because say with the Common Core curriculum as it came down, it was really pushed down upon teachers. Like in mathematics, in some school districts, I know that they were given scripts to kind of read out loud in the classes as they are teaching. It became, and who was creating these scripts? Some I don't know, some corporation that had some people who had never been in a classroom. So I think I personally feel that we have to be very careful that we don't give up that control in terms of solutions, because solutions inevitably end up being local. Like heat pumps work in New York State, but they're not relevant to Florida, right? So we really have to be careful in how we are asking for resources. So I think I will lean on the side that what we're really lacking is time given to teachers by administrators so that they can develop this content. This content has to be developed by teachers, and we have to push. And I think that's what community members where they can be supportive, is that they come together with teachers to ask for that time, so that teachers on their paid time in school can work on curriculum development, which can then be shared out to other teachers.
Great, thank you. I know we're a little bit short on time. I'd like to compile all the resources, maybe after this we can connect and share those out with folks, but is there one or two specific resources that either of you would like to mention that people really sort of look into? I know, Mary Jane, you'd put Canary Media in the chat as well as Drawdown. Are there other resources that are sort of your go-to resources for the work you do?
I like Rewiring America a lot too, because so much of my work is focused around beneficial electrification in physics and mathematics classes, right? So I love getting data from them and then kind of making them my own.
Great.
But I know MJ probably also like, I mean, Allison, I'm thinking of New York City. Do you know that game called, there's a, I've been collaborating with these folks from New York City. They have, what's the name of the game? I'm going to think about it. Maybe we'll put it into the resource. It's a very nice board game about how to decarbonize New York City. It's fantastic. So we'll put it in the resources thing when we send it out, right, Joshua?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And I know this game too. We almost played it in our office. Oh yeah, well, the energetic game. Yeah, oh, you're on
Right,
mute.
that's exactly the game. That's it. Energetic. Yep.
Great.
Yeah, there are so many resources. The BOCES Teacher Training Center, local community centers, local schools and libraries, town governments, Riverkeeper. I have some wilderness organizations here, Wild Earth, Vulpes Wild Arts, and Earth Living Skills, if anyone wants to get their kids or families outside learning some skills. Those are some resources we can send out. There's a book called The Organic Artist by Nick Netto. There's one called The Organic Artist for Kids, where you can go and find rocks and grind them up and make paints and inks from plants. You can find the Wild Ones, Mid-Hudson Valley just started. Our partner, Angela Sisson, just started that. She moved over from the Wallkill Valley Land Trust Pollinator Pathways to start Wild Ones. So if people are interested in native plantings and gardens, tons of resources. I can't even name here.
Yeah, and we'll compile some of these.
Yeah.
And I'll also mention one that we at Partners for Climate Action have supported in partnership with the Mid-Hudson Library System called Libraries of Local, that some of you may have heard of. And there are several libraries in the region that have kiosks that have resources. You can check out books on various topics. You can check out seeds, in some places tools. So those are good resources too in your communities as well. So we'll include the link to that website so you can find your local library branch. We're just about at the end of our time together. I see that Joshua Maines was asking about sort of ways to channel or continue this conversation beyond the webinar. And I know Samrat and Mary Jane, we were talking a little bit about this when we were planning for this. So if there are avenues you might suggest for posing questions or also gathering and sort of continuing this conversation, if there's anything you'd like to share.
Joshua, we're gonna have the climate cohort that we have at the Mid-Hudson Teachers Center. I think most likely next year we're gonna combine it with the Master Teacher monthly meeting. So that would be I think that'd be a very strong group. You're probably looking at something like close to 40-50 educators meeting monthly, and give or take. So please reach out to me, because this is something we're still building. And that, like, we're doing a curriculum writing workshop this summer, a 6-hour workshop. So there are lots of things that are happening. So just please, and anybody else as well. I put my email in the chat. Please do reach out to me. Oh, one more thing, Joshua. I did want to mention this, because this is something. This is the piece where I feel like this is sort of non-traditional, but I think this is part of the puzzle. Is I do coaching with New Yorkers for Clean Power, and it might seem like, what does like clean energy coaching for home energy solutions have anything to do with climate solutions in the classroom? But they do, right? Because it's like, again, if it becomes our lived experience, then I know what to do with it in a class. I might have an idea. So I just put that link in the chat as well. If you ever have a question about any of the incentives that are coming down with the Inflation Reduction Act or anything, please reach out to one of the coaches. I'm one of the coaches. And again, we can have that conversation about how might that be relevant to what's happening in the classroom.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you both.
Yeah, thank you.
Mary Jane, I saw you put your email in the chat as well. So we'll include those in the follow-up email with resources as well. I know we're past our time, but any parting words from either of you before we sign off?
Just that I would be happy to talk about this with anyone at just about any time. Maybe not during dinner. And but I'm available. I love getting together. I love HVCAN making this web of connection that we can all take advantage of, and learning from each other what we're doing as this curriculum and this way of moving in the world is emerging. I'm curious to see where other people are going to plug in, and how we can weave together the different things that we're all passionate about. It's like mycelia, creating this strong web, working together. Thank you.
Yeah, to add to that, I'm sure there are people here who are also doing other awesome work. So I would love for you all to reach out, especially if you're teachers or educators. I'd love to learn from you all.
Same. Yeah. Love to hear what you're all doing.
Thank you both so much for your time today and for sharing your insights and your experiences with all of us. Thank you for joining, everyone. We're going to have our next morning coffee session on September 26th. It's going to be about planning and how municipalities and communities are doing planning and protecting open space and thinking about climate. We're going to have a case study on Ancrum in Columbia County as well as part of that. So stay tuned for registration. Thank you all. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we'll see you soon.